Welcome to GSTHero.com, making your GST filing simple. This presentation is about how to prepare your data to file GST returns through GSTHero.com. GSTHero.com allows two ways of consuming data. It provides an automated data preparation mechanism where GSTHero provides ways to automate and prepare your data required for GST return filing. For that, GSTHero's Tally connector is the connector that sits inside Tally and helps extract the required information from Tally. GSTHero's SAP Z report, which is customized for every company, is also a mechanism to extract required data out of SAP systems. GSTHero also consumes offline utility Excels like GSTHero1 and GSTHero2 that are readily available from various ERP and accounting systems. If the ERP and accounting system does not have these mechanisms, GSTHero also enables manual data preparation mechanism. The manual data preparation happens through Excels. GSTHero consumes Excels separately for outward supplies and separately for inward supplies. Outward supply Excels are sales register, credit debit note register, advance received register, refund register. Inward supply Excels are purchase register, expense register, fixed asset register, imports register, debit credit note register, advance paid register, refund register. The purchase, expense and fixed asset registers can be clubbed into single purchase register if you maintain your data in the same way, or you can have it separate in various different registers as per your accounting practices. Now, the format of all these Excel registers is in a simple and easy to use format. The first column of all the registers is always the document type. Document type defines the type of supply, like you're a regular supply or an export supply, a nil supply, exempt supply, a non-GST supply, a credit note or a debit note would come under this kind of column. The next column is your own GSTN. If you're providing sales, it's your supplier GSTN. Or if you're doing purchase, it's a receiver GSTN. But this is your own GSTN. The next few columns are the counterparty details, where the counterparty name, the counterparty GSTN number, if applicable, the counterparty state is mandatory. The next few columns are invoice level details, where the invoice number, invoice date, the place of supply, and few other details for various other types of supplies. Like if you're doing exports outside country, you'll have to put in details like shipping billing number, shipping billing date, shipping billing port. If you're doing a credit note or a debit note, you'll have to provide details like the original invoice number, original invoice date, and other details like the type of document for the original invoice. The next set of columns after that are the item level details. GSTHero Excels allows you to enlist all your items for every invoice in every separate row. Item level details like HSN code or HSN description, unit of measurement, which is also called a UQC code, which is supposed to be a 3-digit universal code that we need to enter there, the quantity of the HSN item. It has certain other details which are not mandatory, but the first few columns are mandatory here. Beyond that, we have to provide tax level details here. For tax level details, the first most important information is the taxable value. After that, the IGST rate amount, CGST rate amount, SGST rate amount needs to be provided. Let us view all the inward and outward supply Excels and the required columns that are marked in green. Let's look at the total type of supplies, the outward supply and the inward supply. In outward supply, we have four kind of Excels: the sales register, the credit debit note register, advance register, and the refund register. Let's open the sales register and go through this Excel. Alright. As we discussed, the format, the first column of all the register is the document type. In sales register, you have the various document types listed here. If you're doing exports under LUT bond, then you have to mention exports LUT as the document type. Otherwise, every other export outside this country needs to be mentioned under exports only. If you're doing SEZ supply under LUT bond, then you need to mention SEZ under LUT. Else all other SEZ supplies will come under SEZ exports. If you're doing any deemed export supply, then you would choose deemed exports as the option. Otherwise, if you're dealing anywhere inside the country where interstate or intrastate supplies, you have the remaining four options. Where is a regular supply, a nil rated supply, a non-GST supply, or an exempt supply. The regular supply can be done to a registered GSTN counterparty or a non-registered GSTN counterparty. Under non-registered, the customer GSTN number would be blank. Let's look at the other column. The other column is the supplier's GSTN. This is your GSTN number. As per the format, the next three columns is the counterparty GSTN details. So the counterparty name, the counterparty GSTN if applicable, if registered, and the state code, which is mandatory. After that, we have invoice level details. So this section here is going to provide you invoice level data. Under invoice level details, you have document invoice number, you have document date, which is invoice date, the place of supply if it is different. If not, just mention the same state code as the customer state. Reverse charge is applicable for supplies which are marked under reverse charge category under the GST law. Currently, the e-commerce GSTN details are not operational. Effectively, we will be getting this in place. When you're doing exports outside country, you receive shipping billing number, shipping billing date, and port code after your export is initiated. So these details need to be provided under this column. So these are the columns for invoice level details. After invoice level details, we have to provide the item level details. So the columns that form under item level details are these marked. So the first column is the HSN code. The second column is the HSN description. If you have both, you can provide both, but you have to provide either of both, which is mandatory. The unit of measurement, the UOM column, is also called as UQC, which is a 3-digit code that needs to identify the the quantity or the measurement of the quantity. The fourth column is the quantity itself, which defines the quantity of items of that particular item that you are selling. The columns after that are the HSN unit rate, which is per unit value of the item, the base item value, which is the quantity into the per unit value rate, discount if you have provided any, and advances if you have received any. Discounts and advances needs to be deducted from the base item value to get the total taxable value. You may have other values like the freight, the packaging and forwarding charges, and various other kind of charges that could be part of the item. Total taxable value should be inclusive of all. Let's talk about the next section after the item level details is the tax level details. So the total taxable value we spoke about should be inclusive of all the freights and packaging and forwarding charges if that is the way you account for, and should be the total taxable value. The taxes would be applied on this total taxable value based on the type of tax, which is IGST or CGST and SGST. So the IGST rate and amount, CGST rate and amount, SGST rate and amount, as well as cess and amount should be mentioned here in this section. So this is a simple way of preparing your sales register through a manual process. Now let's look at the credit debit note register. As we talked about, the first column of every register is a document type. Under credit debit note register, there are two types of document types. That's either a credit note or a debit note. So choose your type of document based on the type of input you're getting or the sales you're making. The second column is your GSTIN number as usual. This is where you put in your own GSTIN number. The next three columns, as we discussed, again is the counterparty details, which is your customer details in this case. Now, under credit debit note register, and the invoice level details are a little different. So the invoice level details are required in these columns that are marked or selected by me. The first column is the credit debit note voucher number. Second is the date. Third is the reason of issuing that credit debit note. Fourth is the credit debit note is a pre-GST or a post-GST regime. What it means is the original invoice issued before 1st July 2017 or after July 2017. If the original invoice is before 1st July 2017, the pre-GST regime has to be marked as yes. Else it is supposed to be no. The document invoice number is the original invoice number against which the credit or debit note is being issued. The date for that original document. Here we have to provide the document type for the original document. Was the document a regular supply, or was it under exports, under LUT bond, or regular exports? Was it under SEZ, a deemed export? Was it a nil rated, a non-GST, or an exempt supply? We need to mark the document type for the original document here. The place of supply If different, then the customer state code needs to be mentioned. Otherwise, the customer state code needs to be mentioned under the place of supply. The original invoice value is the value of the invoice inclusive of tax. Beyond that, here we have the item level details, where again the item HSN code, the item description, the item's unit of measurement, which should be provided in the UQC code format, which is a 3-digit universally accepted code, and then the HSN quantity. The columns marked in green are mandatory. The columns marked in pink may be entered or may be left blank. It is important to have the total taxable value at the end, because the total tax is going to be calculated on the total tax is going to be calculated on the total taxable value. Total taxable value should be provided, then we can provide if it's an IGST or a CGST and SGST transaction. Based on that, we provide the rate and amount for every tax type. So this is a simple way of entering a credit note against an original invoice if it is post GST or pre-GST transaction. Now let's look at the advance register. The advance register also has a similar type format of Excels. The first document type is the advance receipt. The second is your own GSTN number. The next few columns is your counterparty details. The few columns after that is the advance receipt details or the invoice level details. Columns after that are at item level are marked here, are selected here, which is HSN code, HSN description, a unit of measurement which should be provided in a 3-digit UQC code, HSN quantity, and other details at the item level. The ones marked in green are mandatory. After that, let's look at the tax level data. Again, the total taxable value or the total taxable advance amount is what is very important, because the tax is going to be calculated on that amount. Post that, if it's a IGST or a CGST and SGST transaction, will be provided as per the place of supply and your own GSTN code. Alright, so this is how we provide the advance receipt register. Now let's look at the inward supply types. As mentioned, the inward supply type has purchase register, expense register, fixed asset register. These three registers can be combined. These three registers can be combined into one purchase register, or you can have three separate registers. The extra register that we maintain is the imports register. So any import of goods or services will be provided under this register. Post that, we have a credit debit note register under inward supply, and we have an advance paid register and a refund register. So let's look at one of the register that is a purchase register. Again, as explained, the first column of every Excel register is the document type. Under purchase or inward supply, we have these 5 document types. One is the regular purchase, another is a nil or non-exempt, and the composition. So there are these 5 regular, nil, non-exempt, and composition supply types in purchase. We have maintained imports as a separate register, where that's why we don't see import document types in this register. The second column of your Excel is your own GSTN, which is receiver's GSTN, which is your purchaser's GSTN number. The next 3 columns is your counterparty details, which is your supplier name, supplier GSTN if available, and supplier's bill of state, which is supplier state code. The next few columns selected here are your invoice details. This is your invoice number, invoice date, your receiver's place of supply. Here, the receiver is yourself, and you may have a different place of supply for the supplier, so you may need to put the different state if that is the case, or the same state as your own state. Reverse charge applicable. After this, the next few columns After this, the next few columns are your item level details. The first column is the HSN code. The second column is a description, where you can either have an HSN code or a description. Both would be good to have. Eligibility of your input type. Is your item an input purchase item, or is a capital goods item, or an input services item, or this input item is not eligible for ITC. So this eligibility effectively sets your eligibility for ITC, that is input tax credit. The HSN UOM is unit of measurement, which is equal to the UQC code, which is a 3-digit code that defines the measurement, which is kgs or numbers or similarly. The HSN quantity is the quantity of items that you are purchasing. So the ones marked in green are mandatory and the ones marked in pink are optional. Post this is the total taxable section. So the total taxable value is the value on which you're going to pay your taxes. The taxes types are IGST or CGST and SGST type of taxes. Your total taxable value should be inclusive of all your discounts, advances paid, rates, and all other values. So it should be a accumulation of all of that. And taxes would be calculated on the total taxable value. So this is your purchase register. Your expense and a fixed asset register is exactly the same. That's where if you are maintaining a separate expense or a fixed asset register, you can have it in a different Excel, or you can have the same data combined in the purchase register. Now let's look at the import register. As discussed, the imports register is separate from other purchases. The import register may be import of goods or import of services. IMPG is import of goods, IMPS is import of services. The first column is the document type that needs to be selected. The second column is your own GSTN number, that is the receiver's GSTN number. The third column, or the columns after that, are your supplier details. Now, supplier could be a registered supplier. Under imports, a registered supplier would always be an SEZ supplier. If the supplier is not an SEZ and is an import supplier, it is an out of country supplier. Beyond that, for import of goods, these are the next few columns. For import of goods, the bill of entry number, the bill of entry date, and the port code is mandatory. For import of services, these two columns, the document invoice number or document invoice date is mandatory. If you're doing an import of services, you will not have a bill of entry details. So, when you're doing an import of services, you only need to focus or you need to fill these two columns here. The receiver place of supply is your own state code if it is delivered to you directly, or if you expect the material to be delivered to some other state, then that state needs to be provided here. After this, there is an item level data. So these are the columns that define the item level section. Again, the HSN code or HSN description. Eligibility for ITC, is the goods or the service eligible under ITC? If it is it an input purchase or a capital goods or input services? That needs to be selected. If it is not, then we need to say it's not eligible under ITC. The UQC code or the unit of measurement needs to be provided under this section, and the quantity. The pink section can be filled but not is an optional section. The total taxable value under imports is usually inclusive of your custom duties and other cess values. So please make sure your total taxable value is correct. The total tax section only has an IGST amount and rate because this is an inter-country transaction. Even an SEZ is considered as out of country, so it's an IGST only transaction. So you may have an IGST rate, an IGST amount, and equivalent cess or cess rate and amount if applicable. So this is the imports section, imports Excel or imports Excel register. You can fill based on the kind of information we have provided here. Now let's look at the credit debit. Now let's look at the credit debit note register under purchase. Credit debit note under purchase is very similar to the credit debit note under sales. It is just the parties vary. The first column of the credit debit note register is a credit note or a debit note type. The second is your own GSTN number, which is receiver's GSTN. The next few columns are the counterparty details. The next few columns after that are the invoice level details. Here, your voucher, credit debit note voucher number, credit debit note voucher date, reason of issuing the note. Was it a pre-GST or a post-GST transaction? Which means, was the original invoice original invoice or original purchase before 1st of July 2017, or was it after 1st of July 2017? If it was before 1st of July 2017, then you have to mention why as a pre-GST mechanism. Provide your invoice number, original invoice date. The type of supply, was it a regular purchase or a purchase from a composite dealer or a nil or an exempt, a non-GSTA purchase, an import of goods or an import of sales or services, sorry. So the type of document type is mentioned here. The receiver's place of supply is mentioned here, where this would be your own state, or it could be a different state where you want the material to be supplied by the supplier. The next few sections after that is the item level detail. Here again, we know the HSN code, the HSN description. The eligibility for ITC, is it an input purchase item, or it's an input, or it's a capital goods item, or it's an input services item, or it's a non-eligible item. The UQC code or the unit of measurement is mandatory. The HSN quantity is the quantity of items that you're purchasing is mandatory. The unit value and the base item value can be provided as it's optional. The credit debit note also has the taxable section where the total taxable value needs to be provided. And the tax, either it's an IGST or a CGST and SGST, will be as applicable. So this is how you provide or you fill the credit debit note for inward supply. So friends, we've seen most of the document types here. If you have any queries, you can call us or you can write to us on info@gsthero.com, or you can call us on 800 7700 800 for any help and support for data preparation to file GST returns through gsthero.com. Thank you so much.